1. Basic backstory. I've seen a lot of spooky things in my lifetime. It seems to follow me. I stopped physically seeing it a while ago, but at the last house it got really bad. To be clear, other people had experiences too. Most of it was auditory for me as an adult. Think sighs in an empty room, hearing screaming a few times in distinct whispers. But it was infrequent. Occasionally stuff went missing, only to show up random places. Once my keys went missing and showed up on my Christmas tree. My daughter saw some hardcore shit similar to what I've seen as a kid. She's almost 13. Other outside people experience things whilst visiting as well. I won't go into all the details, but the things seen have included tall black man, not hat man. He wasn't wearing a hat, but presents similarly. An old hag with grey skin, no eyes. And a girl who low-key looks like the chick from The Ring. But the first time I saw her I was 7. And it was at least 6 or 7 years before those types of movies came out. I didn't tell my kid about what I saw, but at around age 5 or 6, she started periodically seeing the same things. Also, my parents were religious, and at that point, I was not exposed to any horror stuff that could have influenced me. Quick note. When I saw things the most as a kid, I did see a psychiatrist, and I was deemed fine, though they thought it was just night terrors. I still see a psychiatrist just for maintenance appointments, history of regular depression and anxiety which is currently 100% controlled with no meds, and I have never shown signs of psychosis. My daughter sees a professional for ADHD and also has no history of psychosis or hallucinations. So now that we've established I'm not having a mental breakdown, onto the story. We moved about a year ago. Things basically stopped. It's followed a few places, comes and go at random times, stopping for sometimes months at a time, but never this long. We thought we were safe. Yesterday I was cleaning the kitchen. I saw my youngest kid, 2, in her teal blue sleeper walk into my eldest kid's room only a few feet from me. I noticed she was not making any noise, which was weird. She even looked at me and gave a small smile as she waltzed in. I immediately told my 13-year-old her baby sister was in her room. She was in there within 30 seconds from the living room. 2-year-old wasn't in there. I was confused. We go to my room at the opposite end of the hall. 2-year-old was where we left her. Then I noticed something. She was wearing her pink sleeper that day, and not the teal one I just saw her in. I was low-key freaked out. Today comes. Nothing eventful for me. My 13-year-old tells me last night she saw a dark shadow figure standing at the foot of her bed for several minutes. Thought she felt something poke her. She told it to go away and went back to sleep. During the day today, she definitely felt a finger touch her hand while she was in her room alone listening to music. Nothing else eventful happened the rest of the day. Tonight rolls around. I have 4 kids in total. My middle 2, 4 and 6, share a room. 4 has been asleep for hours in her bed, 2 has been asleep for hours on the couch. 13 is in her room getting ready to sleep. 6 is on the spectrum and has ADHD, so she's up late often. Around 11 p.m., she's in bed watching a show on her device. Husband gets up at 5, so he's in bed in our room. I was washing dishes in the kitchen so I could carry 2 to her bed, and I could go to sleep. All of a sudden, 6 yells from me. Her overhead light is on. She said someone turned on her light, but she's comfortable and wants me to turn it off so she doesn't have to get up. These lights are those side switches. They take a good bit of pressure to switch on. You can't just flip it. You have to push one side. Everyone is accounted for. I asked her if she saw who turned the light on, and she said no. She was looking at her screen. I heard the click right before she yelled. No way she ran to her bed before I got there. It made no noise. Also, she doesn't know about the spooky stuff. She has absolutely zero reason to lie or try to make up a story. Also, she's at the age where she doesn't play pranks. Her humor is all about poop. Anyway, Not sure why something is back, but it obviously is. We had little luck with smoke or sage cleanses at the last house. Any advice on what this may be and why it's back? Most importantly, how do we permanently yeet it? We don't play with Ouija or anything. But we did use tarot like a week ago. Also my daughter, too, was in hospital for 6 days with low oxygen due to human buccavirus. And just got home a week and a half ago. Not sure if either is related. Final note before people ask, I live in a historical building that doesn't allow for anyone to own or operate gas heaters, etc. Everything here is electric. And there's no chance it's carbon monoxide, etc. I'm not feeling depressed. I don't have feelings of paranoia, despite the occasional spooky feeling. Also, nothing is speaking to me or telling me to do things. And I'm showing no signs of schizophrenia. I'm in a very good frame of mind, no signs of mania, and I'm not sleep deprived. I've ruled out normal things that could be causing these occurrences. 2. Here's some backstory. I love clowns. I happened to come across this precious clown-themed music player while thrifting. At the time, I couldn't find it anywhere online. It's pretty unique, I suppose. Only recently I was able to find something about it online. It's called Moon Music Box by Ems in Taiwan. I'm not 100% about it, but it's being sold by someone on Etsy. Back to the story. When I first got it, my roommate at the time was very uncomfortable around it. They had said while I was at work it would play by itself constantly, but I hadn't experienced it myself. I pushed it to the back of my mind, figuring it was old. I eventually moved in with a new roommate, and that's when things got a bit weird. I left it on my bookshelf. After a week or two, I started having dreams about a figure standing by my bookshelf. They would be standing with the music player, twisting it, setting it down, and suddenly I would wake up. The music player would be going on, and it would be moved to wherever the figure set it. I wouldn't always have the dream, but when I did, it was always horrifying. I would wake up in a panic and feel like I was being watched. The feeling of being watched never really left, but it became tolerable. My friend had come to visit, and she slept in my room with me. She only stayed for one night. She ended up falling asleep before me. I was playing on my phone, and suddenly I hear her talking in her sleep. Not even a few seconds later, the music player started going off. I got freaked out, and the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. The room felt so cold and suffocating. The next day she told me about her dream, and it was the same one I had. I tried throwing it away after that, but it made its way back into my room. I thought my roommate was messing with me, but they hated the thing as much as I did. After that, I had several months of silence, not one dream, nothing. Even then, there was no activity. Now I moved out of that apartment and living with my best friend and her husband. I didn't mention it before, but my cat absolutely despises the thing. He hisses at it out of nowhere and swats at it. Right now it's on a shelf on the wall. I work overnights 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. I've been living with my best friend for about a month now. The first few weeks were fine, but now things were getting weird again. The dreams came back. I dozed off at work around 4 a.m., maybe 2 nights ago. In the dream, I was in my room, the figure standing by my bookshelf twisting the music player. A familiar setting, I guess. I set it down, and I woke up to a text message from my friend. She asked if I was home, and I told her no. She said she heard music coming from my room. She went in to see what was going on after I asked her to. The music player was on my bookshelf, exactly where the figure had set it. Recently, though. I've said that a lot, I'm so sorry. I had woken up from the dream, but something new happened. I was laying on my back, and the figure clawed me. It was so painful. I shot awake and had a burning sensation from my shoulder down to my waist. I went to the bathroom to check on it, and of course, claw marks on my back. Much too large to be my cat's, plus he's incredibly sweet and would never. I just need some advice if any can be given. I've tried just about everything the internet has to offer to cleanse it. Throwing it away didn't work. And I'm at my limit, to be honest. I'm constantly drained now. My room feels so stuffy and just terrifying. I just hope someone can offer advice. Please and thank you. 3. I need validation that I'm not insane. I've never really had paranormal experiences, but I cannot explain this. I'm in college, and me and some other 7 people from my school went on a backpacking trip, and we had 2 experienced leaders. We drove to Zaleski State Forest, which is in the Appalachian region of Ohio. It was early April this year, and it was cold and everything was still dead from winter. After hiking miles into the forest, we set up camp from the backpacking campsite. And there were a couple of other groups of people as well. A few of them were friendly older couples, and then 2 college-aged girls. Everyone was pretty spread out from each other. We set up camp farther away from everyone else. I've always been able to sense energies of places, and the energy in this area wasn't great. It was almost spooky. Each of us had individual one-person tents, and we formed a kind of cluster in this site, with my tent being in the back. So no one was behind me. Our cluster was also right next to the forest because this backpacking site was like a big cleared-off square in the middle of the trees. Fast forward, I'm dead asleep around 2 a.m., and I wake up to leaves crunching right behind my tent. I hear footsteps walking in circles around my tent. They had a sort of heaviness to them that couldn't be a deer or a dog. Also, it sounded like just 2 legs. I cannot make this up. This creature was circling my tent for long periods of time, slowly creeping up to the sides of my tent and then just stopping for periods of time, and then would move on to walking around the rest of our tent cluster. I could hear a human-like breathing from the mouth when it was close to my tent, like a light sort of heaving. I was shaking, too scared to unzip my tent and investigate. I kid you not, this occurred for hours, and it seemed I was the only one awake. Out of nowhere, I see an illuminated light shape in front of my tent. Although I couldn't tell you what it was from inside my tent because it was all zipped up. It was like a warm glow. I might have assumed it was someone's flashlight, except no one was moving. I was paralyzed in fear. I simply couldn't believe it was an animal. At some point, I fell asleep due to sheer exhaustion, but I could hear the heavy footsteps circling until I did. In the morning, I questioned my fellow campers about it, and my leader admitted she heard the footsteps and noises as well, admitting it was bizarre and she would have investigated had she not been so groggy. One of the boys in the group said he also noticed a light that came on, and thought it was someone else. Not a single person in this group went up to go to the bathroom or turned on the light that night. I've heard things about the Appalachian regions being creepy and bizarre, and now I believe it. Has anyone had a similar experience? 4. Okay, so my girlfriend's family live in a very big house. Not a mansion, but a very big house with lots of rooms. They travel a lot, and they told me to take care of the house. I obviously agreed, because why the fuck would I say no, and stayed there for about 2 weeks by myself. Well, I invited some friends over since it's such a big house and there's plenty of room. The house also has a gym, a big backyard, a pool, movie room, bar, etc. Well, one day I'm cooking up some paella, and it's just me and 2 friends of mine, Israel and Jose. Jose was downstairs in the movie room watching some YouTube videos, waiting for lunch. He hates cooking, and me and Israel were in the kitchen. We had not heard from Jose in a while, so we went downstairs to check on him. I called his name. He turned around and said, "If you guys need help, just tell me and I'll go right away." The couch faces the TV in a way that you're giving your back to the door, and the couches themselves are huge, so you can pretty much only see the head and shoulders of a person sitting on them. In this case, all the lights were off, so I could just see his silhouette. I answer, "Nah, man, don't worry, just checking up on you. But if you want to help, you can start setting up the table in about 45 minutes. He answered, "Okay." and I went upstairs again to finish preparing our paella. After a while, I wouldn't be wrong to say an hour and a half later, we asked each other where the hell was Jose, since we knew he would not take that long, and he just went downstairs until the food was ready. I decided to go back downstairs, but this time, I was telling him that the food was ready and he needed to come up and help set the table. I peek and tell him to come up. He turns his head just like the last time and says, "I'll be right there." I tell him to hurry and go back upstairs. As I'm coming up the steps, I hear Israel talking to someone. I go to the kitchen, and there they were, Jose and Israel talking about how good the paella looked. I ask Jose how the hell he got to the kitchen before me, and his answer made my heart sink. "I went downstairs to watch some videos on YouTube, and 5 minutes in, my dad called me, and I've been talking to him in the backyard this whole time." I just shrugged and said, "Okay, let's eat." I didn't want to freak them out. They were sleeping over that night. But to this day, I have no idea who or what was watching the television and talking to me when I went downstairs. It looked like Jose. It most definitely talked like him. But I'm sure as hell it wasn't him. Since this has happened, I have actually cleansed my girlfriend's house. I hope it helps. 5. Growing up, my family seemed to have a knack for picking haunted houses or haunted locations. Being a military kid was part of that. We got sent to old parts of the bases we lived in. One was the entire section of houses was haunted by what the wives, my mother included, deduced as being a Civil War general. This particular base we lived on twice in my life. It was the second time, when I had studied more of the paranormal, that was interesting. It was a young house, one of the newer ones built in the span we had moved from and back to the base. My old childhood home was long gone, but my mom still thinks the general makes his rounds. This house had something else. Both my mom and I have a knack for telling if a house is haunted. To us, it won't feel empty. A haunting-free house feels more like a vacuum of space. I always get the sense that something will peek around the wall at me when I look through the windows. At the house we lived in, I would get the sensation that something was standing behind me. Like in the horror movies where you see the ghost behind the character, that they stand up and it's gone. For fun, I called the ghost Johnny, as in Johnny Rebel, seeing as how it was Virginia and probably another Civil War ghost. One night I was lying in bed and heard what sounded like pacing up in the little attic area. Frantic pacing, like someone was unhappy with something. The activity was also ramping up a little, so my mom and I did a mini investigation. We opened up the attic door and my mom stuck her head up there. Immediately, she called down to my dad, asking if he had put the Christmas decorations up there. He did, and we both shared a knowing look. She took the decorations down, and the activity immediately settled down. When my dad was promoted, we were moved to a new house just a short walk from the old one. My mom came to me one day and said she had a dream. In her dream, it was the dining room from the previous house, and a little boy was sitting at the table dressed in 18th century clothing. She said he looked up and had blood coming from his eyes and mouth. She started yelling at him to leave. She said he looked startled and said, "But I don't want to leave." We both agreed it was an odd dream, and as I thought about it, I looked up yellow fever, knowing it was a sickness prominent in that time frame that boy looked to be a part of. I didn't think it would turn up what I found. Not only had there been a yellow fever epidemic in that area in the 1800s, but there were 2 stages of the disease. If you got the second stage, you would bleed from eyes and mouth. I told this to my mom, and we came to the conclusion that Johnny was probably not a Civil War soldier, but a little boy who died of a terrible disease and just wanted his space left alone. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 279. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you'd be so kind, I'd appreciate it if you'd give the video a share and a like. Right, I don't think there's any shoutouts today. I believe the next one, the next two actually, is on the 5th. So we're okay until then. So I think we'll just move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. Okay, we'll keep it on theme. It's nice to do that when we can. Haunted houses. Given the opportunity to spend a night, or a weekend, or whatever, in a definitely haunted house that would remove all doubt as to whether or not ghosts exist, would you want to? Or do you think it's better not knowing for sure? I think I would. As long as I didn't have to do it alone. Maybe I'd live stream it, but I'd definitely be taking some of you along with me. Let me know what you think yourself in a comment below. Okay. And I think we're going to wrap things up there for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.